You're nothing but a glorified salesman.
Do you feel starting early in sales could be a blessing in disguise?
My first sales experience would be perhaps when I was in class 5 or 6.
It's a maths game. You're trying to decode it into English. Sales is not just about insurance, cold calls.
Sales तो अनिवार्य है.
A lot of people are not happy.
But the point is कि अगर वो करना है तो मांग के देखो. Most likely if you knock on enough doors, a few are going to open up.
If you have a good marketing team, you don't need sales. You get a good guy, the good guy gets his good guys. It's, in a way, pitch decks are like dating. You're trying to get a yes. And board meetings are you're already in a relationship and you're figuring out the future together.
That's, I guess, the primary ethos behind being a good salesperson.
Perfect. Welcome to the Revenue Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Chinmaya Sharma, who's had a great experience, and I think today's conversation is going to be very exciting. I am personally very excited because for the first time, we are bringing somebody who has been on different sides of the table. So I think he started his journey as a consultant with Bain, went on to be a founder, then an operator in a very large-scale startup in Middle East, and today is a part of Infoedge Ventures and back founders. So he has seen the journey from different sides of the table. So super excited to have him. Thanks, Chinmay. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Samir, for having me here. I'm sure you introduce all your guests as very special guests, but I'm happy nonetheless to be introduced like that.
No, I'm super excited. Honestly, for the first time, we're bringing somebody from the investment side of the world. So generally, this podcast, let me also give you context on what we're building with the Revenue Podcast. We feel that the revenue is a backbone of any company. And even despite all of that, today when we go to campuses and talk to young people, everybody wants to be a CEO, but nobody wants to do sales. For some reason, sales has not been packaged too well. People want to do consulting, maybe like yourself, branding, marketing, strategy. So people generally start in sales by accident, right? And then they see that they are struggling, their numbers, their X and their Y. We want to tell them there's other side of the story too. Sales is not just about insurance, cold calls, people flying business class, staying in 7-star properties, closing $1 million deals, or founders raising millions of dollars. I think at the core of it, a pitch is a sales pitch, right? When somebody comes and pitches you that, hey, this is what we are building, and please, if you back us in 10 years, there'll be a return. It's a very hard sell. So there is a sales skill required. So we feel that any CXO journey has to go through sales.
बहुत noble cause है. It's a very noble cause. I will admit to having had the same blind spot about sales while I was starting out my career. During my MBA at IIM Bangalore, if you'd asked me, sales के job में जाएगा क्या? The images it would have evoked would be कि tier 2, tier 3 India में dusty roads पे घूम रहा हूँ. I'm likely selling, small sachets of shampoo or soap to different distributors or retailers, and I'm, returning back, in the evening, extremely tired to, random hotels or motels. That is definitely the image that I would also have thought that sales would have evoked in my head then. It's only much later that you grow up in your career that you realize that no matter what you're doing, whether you're a partner at Bain Company or you're a CXO at a large e-commerce company, I was working at Namshi, or whether you're a partner at a VC fund like I'm right now, the more senior you get, the job essentially just boils down to that magic word, sales. That's really the only thing, or that's perhaps the most important thing that matters. That's perhaps the most important skill that you're going to need later in your career to succeed. And if you're going to need it later in your career to succeed, might as well start doing that as early as possible.
Exactly. I think so. You've articulated it perfectly for our audience. This is exactly what we're building this podcast for. People like you who people want to, they aspire to be. If people like you come and share these stories where sales, how important that is, that gives them a lot of comfort, right? And I think that's why we're building this. Perfect. So I think let me jump on to my first question, which we generally ask with all our guests. That's the only thing consistent, which is tell us your first sales experience. When did you sell for the first time? It could be anything. It doesn't have to be in a job. It could be anything.
My first sales experience would be perhaps when I was in class 5 or 6.
Oh, wow.
Growing up in Calcutta, I used to go to a school called Shri Aurobindo Institute of Education. Not perhaps the most glamorous or the best known school in Calcutta, but extremely glad for the experience that I went through. I remember this NGO called HelpAge India had come on, and they had mandated every student in the school to go around their neighborhood and do some collections, essentially chanda collection for helping out the old and aged. Um, I don't recall how old I was, maybe class 4, maybe class 5 or 6. But I did not particularly, to be honest, give a shit about old people at that young age. I was not particularly driven by the cause of collecting money for, social welfare. I was too busy, figuring my own life out, of course. But I remember, oh God, this is embarrassing. I remember feeling extremely competitive about it. कि अपने क्लास से तो सबसे ज़्यादा चंदा मैं ही जुगाड़ के लाऊंगा for old people. And therefore, then I set out on it. And I remember कि एक हफ्ते, I basically went around door to door. I harangued my own parents into donating money, going to their friends with them कि इसको थोड़े से पैसे दे दो for HelpAge India and so on. And eventually, फिर हर रोज मैं स्कूल जाता था और टैली करता था कि भाई तेरा कितना कलेक्ट हो गया because obviously I did not really care about getting to an absolute amount. I just wanted to collect more than other students in my class. Eventually, I don't know why I remember this, but that's just the kind of sick person that I am. I did not win it. I was...
Were you in top 3?
ये याद नहीं है, but वही फर्स्ट तो नहीं आया था, ये बहुत क्लियरली याद है.
But see, that impression, that experience had on you, I think that's what you even recall today. And the competitive spirit, I think sales in general brings to the table, I think is incredible, right?
Yeah, and the other thing that I keep reminding myself, but as much as anyone else who listen to it, is कि मांगोगे नहीं तो मिलेगा नहीं.
True.
So you've got to ask for it. I mean, why would anyone give a class 5 kid who they don't know some money in cash where he's not even giving receipts or invoices because he's saying this goes for HelpAge India? It honestly makes no sense for the India of late 1990s or early 2000s, late 1990s to be precise. But the point is कि अगर वो करना है तो मांग के देखो. Most likely if you knock on enough doors, a few are going to open up. If you ask for $50, somebody is going to give you $20. So मांग के देखो. That's, I guess, the primary ethos behind being a good salesperson. थोड़ा सा shamelessness चाहिए होता है.
What you described, which is the funnel, which is enough doors, the maths game, a lot of people think that how hard it is. What they don't realize is that there is no other way, just through. You have to go through that, right? When somebody says that why you are successful or why some salespeople are successful than others, they just knock on enough doors. It's a maths game. You're trying to decode it into English. It will not be. It's the numbers game. You go knock 100 doors down. You make those 100 calls. 20 will pick up. 5 will buy. This will flow, right? But yeah, I think so. Tell me that experience of yours, age very early in your life, 4th class or 5th standard, right? And you still recall it. And then you also mentioned that that's the ethos of sales pretty much, that you have to be a little shameless. How did that carry on with you? Like, how did you carry that personal belonging to that feeling, which is you have to be a little shameless if you want to be? And if that shaped some decisions in your career later on?
See, like I told you, I have to be honest, Samir. When I was starting out my own career, it's not like I was actively solving for a sales job. Sales for a large part of, at least the first few years of my career, formative years at least, has been a bad word, not a good word. Sales में तो
nothing has changed.
हाँ सेल्स में उसकी नौकरी लगती है जिसकी डे 0 पे नौकरी नहीं लगती है,
जिसकी कहीं नहीं लगती,
right? I mean, sales is, like you said at the start, sales is something that happens to you by accident, I'd add, or as something that happens to you by elimination of all other options.
True.
कुछ नहीं हो पाया तो you find yourself running pillar to post for a manager who sets you targets every week or every month, or sometimes, depending on your luck, even every day, right? Why would you want to go in a job like that? Is exactly how I used to think at the first, in the first few years of my career. And then, essentially, when I joined Bain really opened my eyes up. As a young person at Bain, First I studied at an IIT, then at an IIM, and my first job was at Bain Company. And when you start out, you're mostly doing a lot of analytics work, a lot of writing slides. But very soon, within a year or two, you graduate into spending a lot of time, sometimes with other people from your team, sometimes all by yourself with the client. And when you're presenting to the client your outcomes, or when you're having a conversation with the client where you're trying to motivate the client to share more information, more insights, more data with you, you are selling a story. Yeah. You are selling optimism. You are selling a better version of the world to that client. And, I could argue that, real sales happens at a consulting firm only once you make partner or associate partner or principal, one of those senior roles. वो बात बिल्कुल सही है. That's when you start selling projects and you start getting revenue. But in most things in life, if you are going to be successful at what you're doing, you're selling something or the other. Even as a young person, you're definitely selling कि देखिए मैं जो काम कर रहा हूँ उससे आपके कंपनी का ये परफॉर्मेंस, ये रिजल्ट इंप्रूव हो सकता है. And if you're disinclined to doing that, then unfortunately you're going to have to remain, I don't know, a spreadsheet jockey or some job that calls for you looking at spreadsheets for a long sort of part of the day. Again, nothing good, nothing bad, but depending on what you want to be in your career, if you're somebody who wants to be a founder, an investor, a consultant, a CEO, a CXO, sales to anivarya hai. You can't run away from sales.
Perfect. I think you've said something very interesting. Let me ask you this, and bladed answer, right? A lot of people think what we kind of established, that sales is an accidental job people start with, or it's an elimination of options. Would you say you are somebody who people or possibly parents wish their kids to be? Go to IIT, go to IIM, get to a top 3 tier strategy consulting firms. So now let me ask you this straight away. Do you feel starting early in sales could be a blessing in disguise? Because when people get that, they're not happy. Trust me, I meet enough of them, started myself, right, in sales. A lot of people are not happy, right? They're like, my friend has got a job as a consultant, my friend has got a job as a strategy operations manager, whatnot, branding, right? But do you think it's a blessing in disguise?
Sameer, देखिए आप इस podcast को you could have called it TSP, the sales podcast, right? But what I really liked and admired was that you call it TRP, the revenue podcast. I just think that the framing around sales has gotten a little awkward in the world that we live in. It's not something that you and I can fix single-handedly. But it's like saying that, a company that I just met is an AI company. No company is an AI company. AI is going to be a key part of how most companies work and do what they do in the world that we're walking into, right? Similarly, there shouldn't, ideally in the world that we live in, be sales jobs. Yeah. No matter what you're doing, there is a degree of sales that you're doing anyway, right? And just rebranding sales to either revenue or to, business or some other metric, whatever metric the company cares about, will definitely help take away a little bit of the stigma from it. For example, see, when I was at Namshi, I was a large part of it, I was the chief commercial officer. As the chief commercial officer, there's 2 parts to your job. Number one, you are the one that faces, what does Namshi do? Namshi is the largest fashion and beauty e-commerce platform in the Middle East. I was based in Dubai. So there's 2 parts of the job. One is you're responsible for the revenue function, which you are essentially doing on a day-to-day basis because it's e-commerce. The e-commerce business operates on a very daily drumbeat. And the second part of the job, equally, if not more importantly, is the part of the job that faces brands, right? तो आपको brands को convince करना है कि हमें और माल दीजिए, in better terms पे दीजिए, give it to us on better payment terms, better gross margins. You have to convince some of the most sought-after brands like Inditex, the owner of Zara and other brands, to come onto your platform and so on, right? So that's the other part of the job. Both the roles, you could technically speaking say involve sales, right? But both are extremely different drumbeats and the kind of conversation and the kind of problems that you're trying to solve for, right? Sales as a singular word simply does not do justice to the ethos of just driving a company, driving the revenue function forward. For example, in the journey of, so I spent 3.5 years at Namshi in the journey of getting some sought after brands like Inditex or other sought after brands onto the platform for the first time, that's not a numbers game. What we described earlier, it's not about knocking on several doors and making sure a few opens, because there are very few doors as valuable as that. दुनिया में वैसे 3 ही 4 doors हैं, right? There's an H&M, there's an Inditex, and so on, right? And therefore, what that involves is कि आप जाओ, आप लोगों से relationship बनाओ, bring empathy to the relationship, don't try to actively sell yourself, don't be sellu. Don't go from the ethos that we mentioned earlier कि मांगोगे नहीं तो मिलेगा कैसे. You don't basically, in the first 6 months of trying to build a relationship with these folks in Europe, you don't go and say, hey, how would you like to list on Namshi, for example, right? You have to come across as a human being that they trust, as a platform that they believe will do justice to their brand. And it's only then that even that conversation of these brands listing on your platform comes up. On the other hand, when you're trying to sell fashion merchandise to a customer, the revenue function, you're obviously going to be very blatant about it, right? I'm running a 30% discount today, and by the way, the discount gets over in the next 59 minutes, 59 seconds, and there is a timer on top, right? So I don't necessarily think the word sales is a good enough word, because it involves a gamut of different soft and hard skills basis what you're specifically doing in the job.
Perfect. So basically saying there's a huge universe of it, right? So it's not just, it's typically like AI in some context, right? That you cannot say there's a company which is AI or not. AI does a lot in that company. Similarly, in whatever role you do, irrespective of where you are, possibly sales is going to play a huge role. And in what context, it could be different to your role. It could be very soft, empathy-driven, relationship-driven versus blatant numbers game as well.
So you don't have to go find a sales role. No matter what role you're doing, my guess is sales will come find you. Just, keep an open mind.
Makes sense. Cool. Let's take a segue into from your consulting job, you decide to be a founder, right? How did that shift happen? What were your everybody who leaves a very cushy job and goes on to build something, there is a huge resistance, right? From family, friends, but more often than not internally, right? As they say, right? A great job is like a golden cage. Very difficult to walk out of that, but you did. So tell me, what were those things internally that you kind of told yourself that you can do this? This is a right thing for you to kind of pick up next.
See, when I was a student in school, I was told that if you're a good student, you take science in 11th, 12th. So 10th में number ठीक आए थे, 95% type आ गया था, so I took science. And then I did decent at science. And then I was told कि अगर आप science पढ़ो 11th, 12th में तो आपको IIT जाना होता है. And by the grace of God, I got like a really shitty rank, but I managed to scrape through my fingernails into an IIT on the first attempt. I went to IIT Kharagpur. Or फिर, my dad was in a sales job all his life. Yeah, he used to do sales in pharma all over India, right?
Classic sales.
Ekdam. So I thought, this manager / sales / management kind of job looks cool. People get to take on flights, people get to speak on phones, and you have large teams to manage and so on. So the young impressionable mind that I thought कि MBA कर लेते हैं. So I was quite clear at every stage of my career. I was quite clear कि ये करना है. तो IIT में मैं सोचा कि MBA कर लेते हैं. तो IIT के बाद, as it happened, I graduated from IIT Kharagpur in 2009, which was a pathetic year given global financial crisis. People of your and my age will recall. So it's not like I got a great job out of campus or anything, but I was fortunate again to get into IIM Bangalore. IIM Ahmedabad से call नहीं आया, Calcutta से call नहीं आया, IIM Bangalore से call आया. I was really bad at the interviews. I was waitlist 69 or something, but perhaps 68 people decided to go to a different IIM or not go to IIM Bangalore. So again, just like at IIT Kharagpur, I just about managed to enter IIM Bangalore. But so far, as you can see, whatever I'd wanted, वो होता गया था. And then I got a good job from IIM Bangalore. I went to Bain, day zero placement, lots of aura and charisma around it. And one way or the other, because the consulting job involves a little bit of analytics and a lot of conversation, I did well at Bain too. So at that point, when I was, let's say, close to 30 years old, I was primed to believe कि मैं तो जो करना चाहता हूँ वो हो ही जाता है, वो मैं कर ही लेता हूँ. I was absolutely primed to believe that. And 2015 was a heady year in terms of just the number of startups that were coming up, the amount of funding that was happening at some extremely pleasing valuations, and so on. And words like hyperlocal and e-commerce services, these words were beginning to become sexy again. So my wife, who's also a batchmate from IIT Kharagpur, she was also a management consultant after finishing her MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. She decided to start a company called Big Stylist, which would do beauty and wellness services at the home of the customer. As you can imagine, words like hyperlocal apply very well. तो आई थॉट कि यार ये तो अच्छा लग रहा है, मुझे भी अच्छा लग रहा है, और मैं तो जो करता हूँ सब अच्छा ही हो जाता है. So that's all. It's not like I had a real appreciation for the customer's problem. I have never been a woman who has had to get vaccine at the last minute, or I've never suffered from a poor facial at least until that point, because I'd never gotten one. तो कोई ऐसे कस्टमर के प्रॉब्लम का अप्रिसिएशन तो था नहीं, बट आई थॉट कि स्टार्टअप करना कूल लग रहा है, कई लोग करते हैं और मैं करूंगा तो अच्छा ही हो जाएगा. तो दैट वाज बेसिकली द रीजन व्हाई आई डिसाइडेड टू डू इट. And as you can tell, that is an unholy reason to start up. That's not a great reason to start up, because आपको अगर कस्टमर के प्रॉब्लम का, पेन पॉइंट का, सोल्यूशन का ढंग से in your bones अगर अप्रिसिएशन नहीं है, you're going to run out of steam. So yeah, that was my reason to start up. Not a great reason.
But how was sales as an experience for you as a founder? So when we have brands backing us, so for example, I started my journey for India's biggest publication, Times, right? And I thought that was hard. Like when I have to go and sell media spaces, I thought that was hard. That was not, is what I obviously later figured out, because I had Times behind me. Prime Properties, India's possibly a little bit of a monopoly there, right? But when you start your own company, when the brand is something nobody knows, when it's just like people listen to you because of you, possibly nothing else. So how was that?
To your credit, you're actually making even that job sound simpler than it is. It's not like when you're backed by Times, that job is any easy, because at the end of the day, it's not such a differentiated product that you're selling. But you're right, that job of sales becomes just a tad bit more difficult when you're out on your own. And the job as a founder, no matter what you're doing, involves a lot of different dimensions. Jisme you're nothing but a glorified salesman. And I'm not even alluding to the most obvious one of raising funds, right? And, fortunately, I was backed by Infoedge Ventures, which is where I work now as a founder. So just the job of selling your idea, your dream to different funds so that they can invest money in, 2 or 3 first-time founders who don't really know what they're talking about, that's definitely one part of the job. But just the tiniest of things, convincing a beautician back in 2015 कि आप जिस AC पार्लर में बैठ के शांति से काम करते हो, आप ऐसा करो कि उससे निकल जाओ, और मैं आपको बॉम्बे में घर घर जाके काम करने बोल रहा हूँ, जिसमें आपको लोकल ट्रेन में बैठ के धूल धक्कड़ गर्मी बाढ़ एंड एवरीथिंग एल्स दैट बॉम्बे फेसेस में आपको जाके काम करना है. Because guess what? Today you will not make more money than that. But if you believe me, and if you stay with me on this journey for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, you will definitely make more money than I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't buy it.
But you sold it.
But yeah, you have to. So, that's just one part of just another dimension of being a salesman. But ऐसे कई dimensions होते हैं. Which is why they say that the best founders at times are just a little bit crazy. Yeah, कुछ तो हिला होता है, वरना why would you actually go out making this pitch and actually feel confident about your ability to convert thousands and then lakhs and millions of people into your vision? But that is why good founders are different. Yeah.
No, I think that's very true. What you said about founders are nothing but glorified salespeople. Convince early employees.
Yeah, early employees. Great example.
Vendors.
Great
right?
example.
Convince investors.
Yeah.
Convince your family.
Yeah,
right?
convince your family. Yeah.
Exactly. Every third month, like my family was, why are you doing this?
Yeah. And in my case, both my wife and I quit our cushy jobs to join the same company. I mean, talk about putting all your eggs in one basket. So you're absolutely right. The salesmanship also extended to the parents on both the sides.
Yeah. So I think, so guys, even founders need sales skills, right? So sales is something which if you pick up as a skill set, we're not saying as a job, You're saying as a skill set, no matter what role you are in. You could be a consultant, you could be a P&L owner, you could be a brand manager. Sales is a skill set and not a job role. And I think that's what we should kind of look at it. Perfect. Now let's take a segue. Now you are on the other side of the table. So you've been a founder who've been backed by Infoedge Ventures. Now you invest for Infoedge Ventures and back founders. How is that transition? How are things changed? How do you look at founders? Because another thing that's personal, what I feel is, I think our ecosystem is maturing now, right? If you look at US or if you look at any other Western market where the investment ecosystem is maybe more mature, you have a lot of operators turned investors, which I feel is missing in India today, right? A very small percentage of people have gone on to start companies, then now are on the investing side. A lot of people are typically in India, what I look at, no offense to anybody, straight from top colleges to consultants to investors. They've never operated, they've never founded companies. So there is a little bit of a connection that I feel sometimes there's a miss, right? But you've been that. You've been in that rare cohort wherein you've built companies, gone to funds, pitched, rejections, multiple, I'm sure, rejections, and then got some backing and went on to build a company. How is now what's your lens look like when you look at a founder who's pitching? What all you look at? I'm sure idea, business, and everything, but from a founder perspective. And maybe if you can also, double dip on a revenue side of it. How do you think this founder will tackle revenue? Do you judge him for his sales skills? Whatever you would want to share.
Got it. I'll first tell a quick story on how I ended up
Yep.
becoming a VC. Earlier in the conversation, I mentioned that I was extremely, as a younger person, I was extremely deliberate about what I wanted to do next. Somewhere, becoming a founder and shutting down a company, I think somewhere it changes you. So I really changed उस experience के बाद. So
Very humbling experience.
yeah, I mean, I often say that the death of a company is almost as painful as the death of a human being. देखिए, we are early stage investors, है ना? तो as early stage investors, sometimes we do get the luxury of meeting companies that already have revenue. Sometimes we may not have that luxury. Mostly हम यही देखने की कोशिश करते हैं कि जो फाउंडर है वो जो प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करने की कोशिश कर रहा है, why is he trying to solve that problem? Does he have a slightly does he have some experience? Is he able to relate to that specific problem? So that we know that the founder and the problem statement connect exists today and will continue to deepen and strengthen over the years. And is it a problem worth solving? आप ढंग से solve कर लोगे तो कोई आपको पैसा वैसा देगा कि नहीं वो problem solve करने के लिए? In the end, just like you said, it comes down to revenue. You can solve a problem very well, but if people are not willing to pay you meaningful amounts of money that more than covers your cost that you'll spend solving that problem, फिर उसका फायदा क्या है? That's more or less the lens that we use. Sometimes we are lucky कि revenue होता है, traction होता है, then it becomes easier. Sometimes we are just having to extrapolate. You could the uncharitable observer could even say that sometimes we're just having to throw darts at the board.
But tell me, very, very little window, right? Maybe 2-3 meetings, 4 meetings, right? And you have to take a call that do you want to back the founder, especially early stage. Yeah. You don't have a lot of data to look at. As you said, right? Sometimes it could just be an idea and founders starting in something which is, they have some experience, but nothing in specific to traction or revenue. But what do you look at from a revenue perspective? That one is this a revenue driven problem? Like, is somebody will make money on this? But what is special about this founder that he can do this?
I'll give an example of a portfolio company that we invested in. It's a company called Urban Harvest. The founder's name is Siddhant Suri. We invested in Urban Harvest close to, I guess, 3 years ago. They used to do cut fruits and vegetables on quick commerce platforms. So Blinkit, Instamart, ये सब पे ऐसे पैकेट में cut pineapples, etc., ये सब बेचते थे. And when we met them 3 years ago, they would have been doing a few lakh rupees a month. Now the founder comes from a family that owns a company called Suri Agro. The founder has literally grown up in the mandi. So very often I tell Siddhant कि Siddhant, ये कंपनी अगर कोई और फाउंडर बना रहा होता तो मैं नहीं इन्वेस्ट करता, और अगर आप कोई और कंपनी बना रहे होते तो मैं नहीं इन्वेस्ट करता. And I'm just trying to illustrate the point that I mentioned earlier about the problem statement and founder fit. This founder, for whatever reason, and it does not need to make sense to you, Samir, and to me, but this founder loves fruits, vegetables, loves the process of automating it, ensuring there is no wastage, loves the process of helping anyone who needs that on the business side, on restaurants, on quick commerce platforms, households, getting it in the cheapest, highest quality way possible. It sounds like an extremely mundane problem, but that's exactly why I'm giving you this example कि अगर आप किसी problem को deeply personally feel करते हो, then you're going to hopefully make a business out of it. 3 साल पहले this company was making a few lakh rupees a month profitably, to Siddhant's credit. And I think last month this company would have made 25 crores of revenue.
In a month.
In a month.
Wow.
Not run rate, shun rate. Revenue in a month. Again, profitably. It sounds like such an easy, such a mundane, such a pedestrian problem to solve. कि फल fruit काटता है यार.
Wow, blows my mind. This is very interesting. Perfect. So sales and founders, right? The classic case is pitch decks and people coming and pitching it to investors. It's like one of the biggest sales pitches of their life. If they don't get through that, more often than not, they don't get to make a company or at least scale a company, right? Because capital is something which is required. And in the country that we operate in, people think that capital is available because people read news and they think this got funded, that got funded. There were phases where possibly some capital was relatively accessible. But then I think in today's world, in the last 3-4 years, 5 years, there is enough capital, but it is not chasing people unnecessarily, right? They are backing people who are able to kind of prove themselves that they are deserving that capital. So it's a classic sales pitch.
You're right.
Keep all things aside, like the problem, the founder problem, market fit, all of that aside, somebody who you still remember came and dazzled you with his sales skills. Somebody who said that, yeah, like brilliant. Because you meet sometimes some people, right? And they're like, yeah, this guy stands out. This, like from us, just if you just look at revenue as a skill set, nothing else. So anything that comes to your mind, or maybe not just in your journey of investing, maybe earlier as well. That some people, because I meet some sales folks and I'm astounded by them. I'm like, dude, he killed it. Like sometimes there's somebody giving me a demo. Like there's some B2B product they're trying to sell to me for using in my own company. And I'm like, is he available? Like right after that demo, the first thing I ask is to my founder's office guy that just have a conversation. Maybe he is, right?
I'm going to give you a really funny answer, Samir. One of the guys that stands out is actually you.
Oh.
I remember, when we were doing, I'm sure you'll put a graphic somewhere to explain what an IC is to viewers. But when we were doing an IC with you, I remember that after the IC, there was a great amount of consensus on knowing that the business that Samir is building at Swag Easy, it has, 3 pros and 2 cons. It may or may not be the fastest growing digital only business, the kind that we at times like to invest in and so on. But I also remember that everybody in the room agreed that there's genuine joy that you can see getting sparked in Samir when he is trying to sell. So there's very few people that you meet who don't take sales as a chore or as a necessary evil, but are actually wired in a way to have fun doing it. तो मजा आएगा तो कर ही लोगे. तो आपको मुझे याद है कि एक्चुअली हमें ऐसा लगा था कि मजा आ रहा था सेल करते हुए, and that's something that really struck with me. But I can give you another example of a founder called Janendra Batra. He runs a company called Oswin. Oswin is an extremely complicated reconciliation platform. Your viewers will go to sleep if I start describing ये company क्या करती है. बहुत boring है, intensely boring है. But let's just say that they sell to banks and BFSI clients and NBFCs of all shapes and sizes. What I really admire about Janendra is his ability to be different people in front of different people. So if he's speaking to the CMD of a very large publicly owned bank, the way he interacts his how bhav, his mudra, just the way he dresses, the language that he uses is extremely different. For example, when he's selling to a US client or to a rather young fintech kind of company and so on. So I just think being that aware of the room, or knowing your audience and being able to modulate not just your content but also your delivery, your materials that you use for that meeting, that calls for a degree of awareness that not everybody is capable of.
No, I think that's very interesting. I think that's also something which is a very softer aspect of revenue and sales, right? You have to be doing justice to your audience, and at times that changes everything. A fintech founder versus a CMD of a public bank, but very interesting. Take me through that journey wherein a lot of founders struggle with, which is founder-led sales model to now bringing in a professional team to kind of scale sales, right? This transition is tricky because you've been doing it, you've kind of started this company, you know everything inside out, you were customer first, so you're now also moving a little bit away from customers, you're not on customer calls on a daily basis, so on and so forth. And I see a lot of founders struggle with this, which is from a founder led sales model to now building possibly a sales engine which is run by someone else, and you're there but you're not actively, because you have other things to do as well, right? So, how do you see that transition, and what are some things that you can share?
You know, it's such an interesting question because I myself don't have a great answer to this question. But जब मैं लोगों से पूछता हूँ, my peers, people who are more experienced than I, different numbers keep coming up. For example, for software company, लोग बोलेंगे कि first $1 million of ARR. Again, I'm sure you'll put a graphic somewhere that explains ARR. First $1 million, $2 million, founder को करना चाहिए through founder-led sales, and then you bring on people who will do sales for you and so on. I just don't seem to agree, at least personally, intuitively, with these numbers. I think companies still a rather mature stage need to have a sales motion that is owned, that is driven, that is minutely planned by the founder. Again, I understand that there's no free lunches. So iska trade-off hai. That particular founder will not necessarily be able to focus much more time on other activities like, I don't know, product, tech, hiring, interfacing with investors, investor relations, and so on, right? But I personally seem to think that trade-off is absolutely worth it. Until you get to a 40 crores, 50 crores, perhaps even 100 crores revenue, the number will change by industry. Sales should absolutely be driven by the founders. I personally believe this because I've seen the journey of transitioning away from founder-led sales to getting professionals in. I've just seen that journey screw up, or actually that cookie crumble the wrong way so often. A cyber security company where we were looking to invest, planning to invest, the company was, let's say, in the range of 8-10 crores of revenue per year. It felt like, at least according to conventional wisdom, कि इस point पे you bring in a professional. So this company brought in a professional. They sell a lot to the government. So this person is somebody who had been in similar roles, sometimes within the government, sometimes outside the government, but selling to the government machinery and so on. It felt like this person will know their way through the government portals and be able to be really helpful in driving the sales, despite their somewhat despite they not being that familiar with cybersecurity as a domain. But what happened is this person totally misfired. And when you bring in a senior person, no matter what you tell yourself, कि मैं तो देखूंगा, or if this person doesn't work out, then I'll let them go within a month or 2 months. Nobody is able to be as cavalier and as decisive as you tell yourself in your head, in your thoughts. So when you bring in a senior person, even if that person is not working out, between all the hemming and hawing that you'll do, discussing amongst all the co-founders, discussing with your investors, by the time you pull the plug, lo and behold, 6 months have gone by. And a senior person actually asks for autonomy. So you actually hand them over some degree of control. Therefore, us 6 mahine baad, you're not left at zero. You're not left at the baseline where you started. You have actually been dragged back by a few miles. So what you've lost is not necessarily 6 months. It's perhaps a little bit more than that. And therefore, I do think that companies should get to a slightly more mature stage just by founder-led sales. आपको pyramid ऐसे नहीं ऐसे बनाना चाहिए. कई लोग pyramid ऐसे बनाते हैं कि I'll get the senior person, then the senior person will build the team around them and so on. what happens is it leads to a binary event where you relinquish control all of a sudden. And then, if you get a great guy, yes, things will work out, but what are the odds? And therefore, you should start really from slightly more junior roles. And then slowly, as you go along, you should build the pyramid towards the top.
I think that's very insightful. Personally, for me also, I think that's something which is great wisdom coming from you, because a lot of us are mistaken with conventional wisdom that built from the top. You get a good guy, the good guy gets his good guys, and the team kind of goes on from there. What you are saying is start from the bottom, get some decent guys, coach them, work with them, and then scale them up to an extent wherein the revenue is scaled, the team inside is scaled, and then internally people grow into becoming leaders, right?
Absolutely. देखो अगर आपका sales engine चल रहा है, then in terms of the hiring decisions, you've got to play defensive.
Yeah.
If you're already selling well, then you need to make sure कि देखो मेरा sales engine तो चल ही रहा है, I just need to make sure that the cost of a mistake should be low. अगर sales engine चल ही नहीं रहा है, then you can play aggressive. Then you're saying that, look, as a founder, for whatever reason, I don't enjoy sales, I'm not being able to do much of the sales motion, then I should get somebody senior and see if they work out, right? So that's probably but I imagine that most conversations that we are having are with respect to founders who are already doing their sales and are somewhat enjoying it, seeing some modicum of success. Unke liye it's important to play defensive when you're thinking about handing over sales to a team or to a leader.
Makes sense. I was actually talking to somebody at Whatfix who joined as an intern sales. Today he's VP sales. And I think we all know Whatfix is a huge success story, and possibly will went on to become a $1 billion company. And phenomenal, right? 10 years of journey from an intern to a VP sales, right? Practically he's like the chief sales officer.
Yeah. Reflects highly on the company, on the person, and on the founders.
But another thing, very classical question, and I have a very counter opinion on that. So I'll put in first, which is people say that product is something you cannot outsource. Sales is something you can when you start a company. I practically don't believe that. I practically feel the other way around. With AI, with a lot of tech agencies in India, at least the region we operate in, developers is something you can, as long as you're very clear on what you're looking at. So I'm not saying product can be outsourced. You have to define the vision. What is it that you're solving for the customer? But I think sales cannot be outsourced. There is no way early on. So a lot of tech founders, they feel that sales can be outsourced, right? You just have to build the product right and it sells. There's also a saying, which is, if you have a good marketing team, you don't need sales. If you have a good product, you don't need marketing teams, right?
Yeah.
Of course, there are some exceptions to everything in life, and I'm sure there are certain products like that. But to a large percentage of the businesses, of the startups out there, as you said, I personally feel sales cannot be outsourced. You're saying that it cannot be outsourced to a certain scale as well.
Yeah.
But at least I'm saying early stage, because if you're not talking to the customer, you don't know the problem you're solving. You're just building in your own world, which might or might not resonate, and at least will not evolve at a pace you want. Because I started with a very different vision of what we were building. And we just kept listening to the customers. I was doing sales. I was on demo calls. I realized this is not the problem that customer has today. The problem is X. We're working on Y. Let's change it. Let's prioritize X first, and then we'll get to Y. So what do you think?
Samir, I'd say product is not done in a vacuum. सेल्स वाले जो लोग होते हैं वो कौन लोग होते हैं? The folks who are doing sales, whether it's the founder or it's a sales intern, these are the people who are actually going out there and speaking to prospective customers for hunting and existing customers for farming, right? Those are the people. If these are the people that are interacting with customers, both current and prospective, then they are the ones that are the richest when it comes to insights around what are the problems that we need to solve, what products are they looking for, what pricing will be acceptable, what are the strategies that we can deploy to expand our account size, and so on. These are the insights that need to be relayed to your product team, your technology, your engineering team, for the product to in fact be useful when the rubber meets the road. है ना? So, for example, we are investors in a company called Gyani.ai. To the unobservant person, they make voice bots, AI voice bots. But as you go deeper and deeper, you realize that they help banks collect loans. That's what they do. अब वो AI वॉइस बॉट्स बना के करते हैं कि कैसे करते हैं, वो अलग चीज़ है, राइट? And therefore, in the market, you will see lots of extremely horizontal AI voice bots company who will also solve for customer service, who will solve for booking tickets, who will solve for 15 other use cases. But I personally really like the focused approach of taking one use case, spending a lot of time with your customers on it, going really deep, and then figuring out what is the means that I will use to solve that particular problem. वो इनसाइट आपकी कंपनी में बस सेल्स से आ सकता है. सेल्स को अगर आपने आउटसोर्स कर दिया और फिर आप प्रोडक्ट अपने दिल के करीब रख के बना रहे हो प्रोडक्ट को, गॉड ओनली नोज आप क्या प्रोडक्ट बना रहे हो फिर.
Very interesting. So I think we've covered founders turning from product and engineering to sales, founders pitching, founders building and scaling revenue teams. Anything that comes to your mind which you feel are founders who make a common mistake with, especially around revenue, maybe early stage, maybe later stage. You see it time and again happening. One could be again very quickly kind of transitioning out from sales motion. But what other common mistakes that possibly you can share, which would be benefited for our audience?
I think this one is a commonly accepted learning, and I will not take the counter side of it. This is just so true. Don't wait for you to build a beautiful product and then start selling it. Just start selling whatever shitty, whatever broken product you're on right now. Start selling it. What's the worst that can happen? You'll not be able to sell it to very many people. But in the process, जो आपको डंडे पड़ेंगे and the insights that you will get will eventually fast track your journey to building that beautiful product that you dream of. Like I said earlier, product vacuum में नहीं कर सकते हो. Sales is the via medium for you to doing a beautiful product.
Also connected to your childhood wisdom. मांगोगे नहीं तो
हाँ,
मिलेगा
मांगोगे नहीं तो मिलेगा
So
क्या?
don't wait for the product to be there for people to be very happy with your product to give you money. Just go and pitch. Just pitch 5 frames, right? Just a PPT. This is how it is going to look.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about?
And you'll be surprised the best founders till date continue to do that. Just continue to do that. If you speak to Janendra at Oswin, he will tell you that he has on multiple occasions sold products that Oswin does not have.
Yeah.
नहीं है, पहले बेच दिया, अब फिगर आउट करते हैं कि कैसे बनाना है.
That's something.
हाँ, but that's ninja level that not everybody needs to unlock. But even if you are on an imperfect version of the product right now, just try selling it first.
I think this is so commonly accepted, hopefully, now that I think even in the founder ecosystem that I'm a part of, a lot of founders have come to realize this. And I think they act on it. For example, even in Swaggy's case, right? So Setu used to help me with product and engineering early in the journey. In today, when we don't know who handles what, but largely, I think he used to have the same complaint that you have gone on and sold HRMS integration. You're 3 months away, right? And I'm like, it's okay, na? Let's prioritize that. He's like, how do I prioritize hiring? How do I prioritize getting a developer? So I think that's now people have come to realize that as long as you have a customer paying for something, which any which ways is related to your product, say yes, build it out.
Yeah. Building a company sales first, at least in my opinion, is the recommended approach as opposed to building a company product first or engineering first and so on. Yeah, of course, these are not universal pieces of advice that will apply to all kinds of companies. If you're doing something that is extremely foundational, if you're doing something that you're building perhaps for the first time in the history of this planet, then of course, go for it and build it first. Then only people will take you seriously and buy it. But for 99% founders, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I think also relates to something in the corporate world, which I think I still remember vividly from my Uber days. My manager, when the first time I got some opportunity which I was not aware of that I might get, and it was a huge opportunity, and I was like, thinking, and I said that just allow me a day to think. She called me in for a beer and she said that when you get an opportunity like this, you first say yes, and then you figure it out.
Absolutely. That rocket ship thing.
Exactly, right? You don't say that, let me think. You don't have to think. What is the worst that will happen? The company is trusting you with this.
What beer were you having?
Beer, I don't remember. I hope it's Ultra. So that the mild conversation and the mild beer goes hand in hand. But yeah, I think that's very relatable here, that if a customer offers you money for a feature, even if you don't have it now, and you think it's going to be a part of a bigger product that you're building, say yes, kind of prioritize it. And I think even today I do it all the time, and still I think Setu is not happy, but I think that's okay. That's the conflict, which is a positive conflict that will continue to happen. Perfect. I think a very interesting conversation. I'm loving it. Any other specific things that you would want to share for people who are in the revenue side of the world, which is hardcore? So what we've established is sales is not a role; it's a skill set, which any which ways everybody has to kind of hone and get better at. But a lot of people that I meet who are typically in the sales jobs per se, they feel they've been handed a rough hand, right? They have targets to meet, they have meetings to do, follow-ups to happen, and their job is not. That's the biggest one, the biggest myth out there, that a salesperson's job is not secure. Who's it? A founder's job is not secure. Somebody at
Yeah.
Google is not
Yeah, you're
secure.
right. You're right.
There's nobody who's secure, but salespeople think that's very 0 and 1. If I don't meet my numbers for the quarter, they'll have that conversation with me. So any insights or anything that you would want to share to that side of the world?
See, as I look back, I told you earlier, Samir, ki Bain mein, to be able to make your way into any client, into any specific relationship, you'd actually have to sell them a vision for why the work that I'm doing will make their company a better company and that individual's life slightly better, his promotion slightly more attainable, his increment slightly larger, for them to be able to believe that their interests coincide with my interests. Similarly, at Namshi, I remember the toughest meeting that I used to have would be this monthly board update that we would do with, the chairman of the board and the CEO of MR. And for several of those board meetings, मुझे याद है कि I'd be quaking in my boots, I'd be shivering क्योंकि sales targets नहीं meet हुए होते थे या कभी margin target नहीं meet हुआ है. And it was a company that MR had recently acquired for a pretty dime from Rocket Internet. So targets high होते थे. MR is anyway a pretty aggressive environment. It's a pretty aggressive company. You don't build the tallest building in the world and the largest mall in the world by being a bunch of softies. So, but un meetings maybe just to come out of those meetings without too many bruises, I'd have to sell to them that this plan that I have now implemented for the coming month, no matter my misses in the current month, irrespective of that, current month में मैं अपने रेवेन्यू टारगेट्स डिलीवर कर दूंगा, मार्जिन टारगेट्स डिक्लेयर कर दूंगा, इस बड़े ब्रांड को जिसको हम 1.5 साल से चेस कर रहे हैं उसको अगले 2 महीने में लाइव करा दूंगा एंड सो ऑन, राइट? I'd have to sell it to them. Similarly, as a founder, like we discussed earlier, you'd have to sell to investors why this is how this particular industry should work, why the current state of the world is not how it should operate, and I have a better idea, and this is how I'll scale it, this is how I'll make money, and this is how you will make 100x or even more on the money that you're going to give me right now, apart from selling to, like we said earlier, other people who will join you on this journey. The common thread across most things that I've done, the common thread that represents the key to success is your ability to sell. Sometimes you'll be able to do it, sometimes you'll not be able to do it, but just internalizing that no matter what you're doing, at what level of seniority, if you're not embracing opportunities to sell, if you're not working on that mindset almost, then you're not necessarily gearing yourself up for a long arc of career success in the field that you're in. Just being able to internalize that, I think, is quite important.
Perfect. I think what you said about MR is very interesting. I think I went to Dubai a couple of years back for the first time, and I've only been to Dubai once, right? And I think I so relate to, I read somewhere or someone said and I heard it, which is somebody went on and built the tallest building in the world in Dubai, and they set the benchmark. And everybody follows, right? Now, everything in Dubai, there's a different benchmark. From a cab that you get to the roads there are, even a 3-star property in Dubai is possibly better than a lot of 4-star, 5-star properties in India, right? They just set the benchmark and now they just live to that. Last question before we kind of let you go, right? Which is, do you see founders do better in pitch decks or like when they're pitching for investment or boardrooms? Because I think that's a different ball game. You've been to boardrooms on this side And I'm sure now you've been to boardrooms on the other side, wherein now as an investor, you're looking at what's happening. What's a company that used to do lakhs in revenue in a month, doing 25 crores? What's the plan to get to 100, right? So how's that shift, and how do you see founders scaling themselves there?
See, the framing around the pitch conversation is not a very healthy framing, to be honest. Again, this is how the industry works, and likely above my pay grade to change how the industry works. But every pitch meeting, whether in that installment or in two more, is going to end with a yes or no. Is basically the framing, right? Whether it's a founder or any individual, any human being, they are not necessarily going to operate to their full potential. No matter how much we motivate people on this pod, Sameer, to be comfortable with sales. But अगर आपको पता है कि इसका framing एक meeting में या दो या तीन में yes or no, it's a very binary outcome that's going to emerge. That's not where you thrive. Especially hold it in contrast to a board meeting where a founder sits down with other members of the board for 2 hours, 3 hours, and actually gets the opportunity to go deep into the ops, the commercials, the customer stories, and so on. Founders typically tend to enjoy board meetings and display their full potential and their hold of the business way better.
Awesome. And I think exciting for me to hear that, because I do meet a lot of founders who are very anxious about their board meeting. They think that board meeting lasts 3 hours. It's a week gone from the life, right? So from pre and post of a board meeting, it's like a different journey altogether.
I guess we as investors need to do better to just lower the bar on the board meetings. It should not be anything more than a conversation around the business. No matter what I say, of course, the cultural understanding is that the founder will bring a few slides. The slides can tend to be 70, 80, 100, maybe even 500 in number at times. But I guess as investors, it's up to us to just...
So in a way, pitch decks are more like dating. You're trying to get a yes. And board meetings are you're already in a relationship.
Yeah.
And you're figuring out the future together.
Yeah, board meeting should be like a dinner table conversation, right? At the end of the day, where you ask the other person, how was their day? I'm sure you've been in plenty of those.
Yeah. Perfect. So I think thanks Chinmaya for doing this. This is lovely, and I think a lot of our audience would see a very different side of how investors look at founders, how people turn into founders in the first place. Some very insightful discussions on, even for founders, right, who are building an early stage in their company, how to scale their companies, think of revenue as a function. Lovely having you. Thanks again for doing this.
Thank you, Sameer. Thank you for having me here.
So guys, do follow us and listen to our podcast if this kind of content helps you. And trust me, if you are exploring anything around revenue, a lot of our conversations that will bring to you, because that's what we're building this for. We want to change the perception around revenue and bring a lot of insights to people who are early in that journey.